Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode 3 of Let's Be Soulful. I am so excited about today's episode. I'm going to be telling you about a bit of my journey over the past couple of years and then how that led me to a new session and kind of a new body of work. And I'm going to explain what that means. And I'm just happy to be honest and be truthful. I think that the most profound, I'd say, transition that has occurred within me over the past year has been this desire for the truth above all else. And I even would rather not get what I think I want in favor of what's more true for me. And that feels like such a huge moment of growth because even though I am spiritual and have been for the past decade, as I shared in the first episode, there's definitely still a part of me that wants exactly what I think I want and can get very attached to the way that my ego wants things to play out. And what I've really been forced to do over the past year, I say forced because like life has been essentially doing her thing and I've been along for the ride. And I feel like the lesson is we can really want something, but at the end of the day, we have to trust that there is a higher plan for us. And if things in our life feel forced and consistently like so heavy, it might actually just be because those things are not meant for us. And when we can trust that and accept that, it lets the higher, and I would argue, more divine plan unfold. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, leading up to the introduction to my new session called the Essence session. So I want to start the story off with where I was even. I'm also linear time, you guys. I'm like, I don't like, I know what of course, like I pay attention to the date, but sometimes I like completely forget what year it is. So I think I'll pull back to when I moved to Hawaii in the summer of 2021. So I essentially found the human design system, which was my segue into spiritual work in 2017 when I was living in Colombia. And the only way I can describe it is like fate. This was a moment in my life that felt like pure destiny. I read about human design in an article in Goop, and the article was titled, "Wouldn't life be so much easier if you knew how you were designed?" And I was just having a moment of a lot of existential crises in Colombia. I was very happy to be there, as I shared in the first episode, but I was kind of at this moment where I didn't love teaching. I didn't know what I was going to do next, and I felt really lost. And I don't think I understood I didn't understand the soul very well. And so I spent a lot of my time trying to micromanage and like mentally plot out what I was going to do next. And it just caused a lot of stress and anxiety for me. And at the time, I had loads of free time because I taught in a public school through the teaching program I did, and teachers went on strike. And so, because of my contract, I was like forbidden to go to school. I wasn't allowed to partake in any of the activities for the strike. I, we were told like stay home and was still receiving my teaching salary, but we weren't really supposed to travel in case the strike ended. Everyone else in my program, because they weren't so intense in general, like was like, let's go off and travel. But I was like, no, I have to stay. I'm committed to, being the best teacher possible. So I stayed in Cartagena and just had a lot of free time on my hands for really the first time kind of in my life because, as kids we're so busy. And I mean, I was lucky to have uh, extracurriculars in school. And then I went to college and then college was busy. And then I felt like I just had this wide open space in my life and did not know how to fill it. And so I spent a lot of time like researching grad schools and nothing was feeling right. And it scared me. So I was just basically exploring things that felt interesting to me, found this article in Goop one day, and it was like a vacuum of my energy. Like when I don't even know how to describe it. It's like it like drew me in when I learned about human design. I was obsessed. And not so obsessed that I would continue to study it because at that time there was very little information available about human design. But I remember talking to my friends about it, and they were like, this sounds really weird. And I couldn't get it off my mind. But then I could not find information at the time. I did find Jenna Zoe's website. I would end up working for Jenna years later and reached out to her, but she had stopped reading human designs and was essentially like, I just don't do this anymore, but stay tuned. So I dropped the topic from there, ended up moving to San Francisco, getting a job in tech. I'm sure I'll talk about that at some point. Pivoting again to go back to Latin America to get a job at an NGO in Panama. And at this point, I was working in Panama City, and I worked for an NGO called Global Brigades. Transparently, they're like, in my opinion, like not a good organization, and they're run very poorly. But that was just who I was working for at the time. And I think I was facing a lot of like sobering realities around working in the international development space that were making me realize that I had again found a path that I didn't want to do anymore. And I was like, okay, another dead end. Sick. Thanks, universe. But in that process of inquiry around what I was going to do next, I found Jenna Zoe again, this time on Instagram. And Jenna was writing about human design at the time still. And I was immediately really interested in everything she had to say about human design. I was like, this is so cool. This is fascinating. And I want to learn more about this. So I kind of like bookmarked this topic of human design. At the same time, I was doing a lot of spiritual research. I write about the first time I read The Anatomy of the Spirit. Like if I'm writing emails for my list, I'm like, this is how I knew. But really, the level of, I would say, energy available to study spiritual topics was a huge green flag from my soul. Like I would stay up until late in the night reading Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Meese. You guys, if you have not read this book, it is truly phenomenal. And I don't use that adjective lightly. It's incredible. And I would stay up super late, highlight every passage. And I was like, there has to be something going on here because I have such an abundance of energy for this subject, this line of work. It's like it was like water for my soul. And I had no idea I would go into spiritual work still at that time. I just was pretty clear that I was like, I want to be an entrepreneur. I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I don't come from a lineage of entrepreneurs. Pretty much everyone in my family on both sides have been employees. They've worked for other people and been able to create like really beautiful, successful lives. But I just didn't even know anyone in my life who was an entrepreneur, but that's my dad's best friend who was a contractor, had his own business, but burnt out and didn't like it. So I was like, okay, I don't really know anyone else. But then at that point, Instagram had become really popular. This was like 2019. And so, there was lots of access to seeing people's lives in new ways. And so on Instagram, I was following different, spiritual entrepreneurs, like getting pretty intrigued by what they were doing. But I was like pretty clear that I just wanted to start a business, but I didn't know what. And then summer of 2019, I also had my first clairvoyant reading for the first time with a beautiful healer out of New York City who I'll link in the show notes. And her session with me was incredibly profound. It was actually only a 20-minute session, but I left it being like, okay, I'm onto something with like wanting to be an entrepreneur. That's really what the reading was about. And so I decided that I was going to start a clothing line because I am still obsessed with clothing. At the time, I was like, no, I've always been obsessed with clothing, but also as a super passionate environmentalist, very interested in sustainability, which has always been a big interest of mine. I felt this kind of inner, I'd say, turmoil around my desire to like dress cute and look cute because the clothing industry is so destructive to the environment. And I was like, you know what? This is a great way to marry all my passions together. I can help the world. I can be involved in, I'd say like aesthetics, which I love, because another thing coming from conservation, international development, these fields are really important, but they're oftentimes kind of, they're bleak, if I'm going to be frank. It's a lot of conversations around how, the human population is probably not going to make it. It just can get pretty dark. And I just don't think that's the way that I am born to serve and help the world. So clothing felt like this really light, cool, but impactful way to help the world. So I quit my job in Panama City. I moved back to California for a couple of months. and essentially found this startup incubator in Chile. It was called Startup Chile because I really wanted to stay in Latin America. And they had a program that was giving people, I think it was like $15,000 of equity-free money to create a prototype. So what was cool about this program is that, it was in Latin America, and then you didn't have to have a prototype, which I didn't yet. And they were going to give you money to create your product. So I was like, this is perfect. I went back home, started working on my startup idea. I was going to call it Sabe Amar, porque sabe in Spanish is like to know. And then Amar is to love, but El Mar is the ocean. So it was going to be this like cool play on words that was like to know how to love the ocean. And I was very into this idea. I started to do the market research, kind of figure out what I would do exactly, applied to the first round of funding through Startup Chile, and then left to actually move to Costa Rica at the time. This was when I was like, my destiny is in Costa Rica and I need to live here. And landed in Costa Rica, found out that I did not get the first round of funding through this startup. And then they essentially were like, please apply again. We like actually think you have a great idea. You just need to make it clear. It was they're funding tech startups. So like this, it needed to somehow show that it was a tech startup. And of course, anything online is enabled by technology, but I did not do a good enough job like explaining that. And it's a long story, you guys. Basically, like you had to submit your application, but then once you submitted it, it brought you to this like really extensive questionnaire that I didn't know about. So I'm a total procrastinator, if I'm going to be honest. So I submitted my application at the last minute, and then I had like 3 hours to do this incredibly in-depth questionnaire. And I was like, why aren't these questions in the application? Regardless, I didn't have ample time to fill them out. And they were like, just apply again. We love your idea. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm a shoo-in and this is my future. So I decided that I was going to keep working on the startup idea. And I had money saved up that I used to, start my adventure in Costa Rica. And I was living the super frugal traveler life, you guys. So we're talking shared dorms. I was like, I'm trying to make this money last. And I had enough saved up that I could still work on the clothing line idea. But Costa Rica was getting to be very expensive. It is the most expensive country in Latin America, hands down, especially the part of Costa Rica that I'm in right now. So it's just a harder place. Your money just doesn't go as far. And my soul, I think, well, my soul really saved me because I was burning through my cash. And I went to Colombia for a wedding to see my best friend get married. And then from Colombia, I had a flight back to Costa Rica, but I just was like, I don't want to go to Costa Rica. I don't know why, but I'm going to follow this intuitive nudge and I'm going to go to Argentina. So I had always dreamt of going, always dreamt, as in the moment I learned about Argentina, met Argentine people. There's a lot of Argentinians throughout Latin America. So I meet a lot of them in Colombia. And I was like, Argentina sounds super cool. And I'm going to see if I can get a cheap flight to Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires is also one of the hardest things for me to say in Spanish. So I'm not really going to be saying it properly, just so you know. But so I found a really inexpensive flight from Medellin, Colombia to Buenos Aires, went to Medellin to visit my friend, and then flew to Argentina. And I feel like truly this was a moment where I'm really glad that another moment where my mind didn't interfere with my soul, because Argentina sadly has a really high, the inflation there is pretty bad because of how unstable the Argentine peso is. So great for foreigners and extranjeros. So I got there and I immediately felt so much relief by the lack of financial pressure, because I was feeling that so much in Costa Rica that it felt really good to get to Argentina and feel like I could get a flat, I could get, great groceries, and I wasn't worried and could really focus on my clothing line. So this is, of course, January of 2020. So I got to Argentina January 23rd of 2020. So the anniversary of my dad's passing. And then, of course, COVID hit shortly after. So I had about maybe like a little over a month in Argentina before the conversation of COVID even entered the conversation. I was, living in my flat in Buenos Aires. I was like was pretty smitten, you guys. I was pretty obsessed with Argentina. I was like, I think I'm really going to stay here. And then the next round of the funding application for Startup Chile was due, yo creo que, I think it was at some point it was that spring. So my plan was I'm going to stay in Argentina and I'm going to buckle down, apply to the startup funds in the spring. And I think the program started shortly after, like in the summer. And, in my mind, I'm like, this is my future. I don't have nothing to worry about. So I'm in Argentina working on my clothing line idea, but at the same time, Jenna Zoe launches her human design reader training. And I was just so curious about the human design. It was worth it for me to do the training. I still remember one of my best friends from college. Shout out to Miss Natalie. You are my favorite. I love you. She came to visit me when I was home in Orange County, and we went for a walk. And I was like, I'm thinking about doing this like human design thing. I'm not sure. And she was like, well, it seems like it would be worth it. Like we talked it out. And I was like, you know what? Even if all I ever do with this training is read my own chart and my family's charts, check. Like there was really just not, you couldn't get the information. And I was not evolved enough to really understand the definitive book of human design. The only book written with the founder, he goes to, or he wrote it in tandem with somebody else. I was not there in my consciousness. So I needed a different way to get the information. And I did Jenna's training when I was in Costa Rica, moved to Argentina, and that was when she was doing like live sessions for everybody who had done the reader training. And I was still like pretty smitten with human design. I was reading everybody's charts that I could get my hands on. My friends in Argentina joke, we like went to a bar one night. And this would have been right before the world lockdown. And I don't think I went out once in Argentina. This is like the only night I went out with my friends. And I remember they came over and we were like, we never go out. Like, what's with that? And they were like, let's go out tonight, right now. And we went to this bar, and I think I read like 5 people's human designs and just like disappeared. And my friends were like, okay, you can't disappear at the bar to read human designs. Like, we had no idea where you went. We were panicking. I was like, don't worry. I was just enlightening people and letting them know about their human designs. So I was really, really in love and enjoying the work. So what I decided to do was apply to be one of Jenna's recommended readers and then start my own kind of human design business essentially. And my thought was, I was like, this will fund my clothing line. This is the perfect plan. So I remember I made my first website via Squarespace in over 2 days in this one cafe and put up a human design reading. And at the time, I knew really nothing about business, you guys. I just was like, I'm going to figure this out somehow, some way. I had no followers on Instagram. I really actually didn't even use Instagram. I didn't even use it for my personal life. I just thought that social media honestly was for vain, self-absorbed people. So I never used it. And then I was like, okay, I want to do this human design thing. I'm going to post a little bit on Instagram. But then I applied to be one of Jenna's readers that spring. I did a reading for one of my best friends in the world, sent in my application, and then found out a couple of weeks later that I was going to be one of her readers because I tagged her in something on Instagram, on my Instagram account with like literally 15 followers. And she commented and was like, oh my gosh, Sean, I have really good information coming for you soon. And I remember being so excited, you guys. I like danced around my flat in Buenos Aires. I was like, this is so fun. So I definitely was excited, but still my energy was on the clothing line. So I lived in my flat in Argentina. So the week that the USA shut down for COVID, Buenos Aires shut down 1 week later. And at the time, of course, no one knew how serious COVID was going to be. One of my best friend, Natalie, who convinced me to do the HD training, her brother had been studying abroad in Buenos Aires. I had just met up with him. And she was one of the first people that was like, yo, I think you need to go home. Like everyone from my brother's program has evacuated. And I was like, no, I'm not stressing. Like, I think it's fine. My other best friend was in grad school. She got sent home. She also was like, I think this is serious. But in my heart, was like, it's fine. I'm going to stay put in Buenos Aires. And then we started to get information about COVID, and I don't know what it was like because I wasn't in the United States, but I overnight a switch flipped in Argentina. I remember leaving my flat the day that they announced the lockdown to go get groceries, and it was like the apocalypse hit, which I imagine it was like that for anybody who lives in the city. I'm from a more like rural part of California surrounded by nature. So there's not really a lot of people around ever. But Argentina was like apocalyptic and scary. Luckily, we didn't have loads of we didn't have any toilet paper shortages, thank goodness. And because of, honestly, my economic privilege, I could afford to shop in like the tinier, more like I'd say stores targeted towards specialty food. So I didn't even have to wait in grocery lines. Like I was really lucky. So COVID hits. I'm in my flat in Argentina for like probably 6 weeks, you guys, maybe 7 weeks. I basically, all I did, no joke, was research for my clothing line, listen to episodes of Masters of Scale with Reid Hoffman, who I love. Thank you, Reid Hoffman. Like essentially try to learn as much about business as I could, work on my startup application. And then I wasn't doing too much to nurture the human design because I knew that I was going to eventually somehow become one of Jenna's readers. I didn't know any of the details, but I was really just in my flat. And a pivotal thing happened actually when I was living in Argentina is that I connected with my long-term healer therapist, as I call her. Her name is Rachel. I'm going to have her on the podcast at some point. She's incredible. And she is actually the person who really helped me, I'd say, transition my energy from being like dominantly masculine, or I was running on such a masculine, I would say, what's the word I want to use here? Like I was running my energy in a very masculine way and I was ignoring my feminine. And I think that my essence is feminine. I have like a very balanced masculine feminine energy, but I was completely ignoring my feminine. And so I was inadvertently like burning myself out when I hadn't even started the company yet, y'all, with the clothing line. Like I was like, I hadn't even gotten the money. I wasn't even ready to make the prototype. And because of my like energetic approach to the business and wanting to start it, I was like pretty much burning myself out, living in my flat by myself in COVID in Buenos Aires. You guys, like it was not healthy. And I remember I went to sleep one night crying and I couldn't figure out why. And I realized it's because I was so tired, like energetically tired in my bones, because I just was like pushing myself so much to make this idea come to fruition. And I was really exhausted. So I met Rachel, I had my first couple sessions with her, and then it was announced that Argentina was going to cancel all flights in and out of the country for the foreseeable future. So I bought a government relief flight home. Thank goodness, you guys, the United States of America, we have our flaws, but we take care of our people in a lot of ways. And one way is through mass relief flights. Like I remember just feeling like I was afraid that I wasn't going to get out. And the flight that I got on, I got the last seat on the flight. And it was said that it was going to be the last relief flight. And then essentially the US government found out there were more citizens in Argentina that wanted to come home. So they kept running them. But crazy, you guys. I remember being so scared because I would get stopped by the police when I was walking to get groceries sometimes because I mean, if I look like I'm going to be from any Latin country, I'm going to be Argentinian because a lot of Argentines are Italian. I am Italian, but I look like a foreigner. So sometimes I would get stopped and the police would be like, what are you doing? Where are you going? I remember I had to walk past the same cop twice in one day because I like dropped something off and he was like, you need to go home. Like I shouldn't see you twice in one day. And I was like, okay, fair. And the energy was like thick with fear, you guys. Like I'm sure it was the same in the United States, especially in urban areas, but it was palpable. And I just remember panicking. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get stopped on the way to the airport. I'm not gonna get out. I was like, ugh. And luckily, I made it to the airport. The flight was like, I don't know the way that they did this, but they ran the flight like in coordination with like the plane was old, you guys, is like the point here. Like old ass airplane packed to get to Miami. Like the plane was full. And obviously it's like peak COVID, like we don't know what's going on, And I remember the woman next to me, like, if you are a healer, you hear me 100% on this, kept leaning over to tell me her life story. And I was like, Mommy, you need to like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, I really can't have you this close to me. So fly to Miami. And then actually remember you guys getting to Miami and feeling like such a sigh of relief because I was like, oh my God, I feel way more at ease. We're not going to get political on this in this conversation. Everyone has their own opinions about COVID, but there's just a difference in a country where you don't feel so much fear around the government, which like I don't. I have a position of privilege, being, that I'm a white woman, but I just remember feeling relief landing in Miami and being like, okay, I don't have to be in this really like aggressively fearful atmosphere that became Argentina. So I got back to California, had submitted right when I got back, I submitted my application for Startup Chile. I had my birth. I remember I quarantined like in my room and I celebrated my birthday. My family was very terrified about COVID, rightfully so. And yeah, it was a funny time. I remember like eating dinner at the top of the stairs and my family ate dinner in the living room. And it was celebrated my 27th birthday. And yeah, you guys all know COVID was like a hectic time. So I submitted my application for Startup Chile, had found out at that point that there was going to be the launch of the My Human Design website where we were going to be readers. And I think that meeting happened late May. I think the website launched in like June. So I was like, okay, great. I'm still going to do this human design thing, but I should know that I'm moving to Chile. They had shifted the program because of the pandemic, but I was like, we're still going to find a way to do this. And then I found out, so I had a meeting for the recommended readers for Jenna's website, and I got an email that was like, hey, we want to get everybody together. And if you're listening to this and you follow Jenna on Instagram, or you've gone to one of her events, Jenna genuinely is she's such a chill person. Like she's, produces great work, but really her energy is so like chill in a beautiful way. So I really thought that there were going to be like hundreds of us. I thought she was going to be like, yeah, if you want to be a reader, like come join the crew. I just want everybody to get their human design read. And that was not the case. There were only 15 of us. So I always tell the story. I joined the meeting for recommended readers with my retainers in and my camera off because it was like really early Pacific time. And I was like, oh my God, I got to pop out my retainers and like introduce myself. So I had the meeting for the recommended readers, and I think I realized in that meeting that this was going to be more of I guess, like pivot in my work than I thought, because I was like, okay, if there's only 15 of us, and Jenna at that time had a huge following, obviously she's even more popular now, but even at that time, she was by far and away the most well-known person in the human design space. So I was like, okay, this is going to become at least some part of my life. And then I found out that exact day that I did not get the second round of funding through Startup Chile. They basically were like, here's what we need from you. But they were like, we still like this idea, like we actually mean it, apply again. And I felt my body say no. Like I was like, you know what? I love this clothing line idea, but it's a pandemic. I frankly, like at that point, I had burned through my savings traveling and living in Argentina. And I was like, I just need to stay home, focus on creating financial security for myself again. And I have this great opportunity to do this thing that I love, which is read human design. And I'm going to follow the energy. So Jenna's site launched a couple weeks later, and I started to read the human design professionally. And it definitely wasn't like overnight I was reading loads of charts, but by the spring, I ended up getting a second job. I worked as like a personal assistant online through a site for freelancers called Upwork. If you guys are curious in freelance work, I love Upwork. So got a job as a personal assistant, read human design charts, and I felt really something shift in me through reading the human design. I think that system and that like modality really was the perfect way for me to get started because it's so logical. It's interesting because I think that human design appeals to men even more than astrology does because it can really be presented in such a logical, digestible way to the analytical mind that gets people on board with it because I had such a diversity of clients. And it was perfect for me because I am analytical to a fault. So human design was the perfect little gateway for me to get into this work. And I started to read the human design charts and my intuitive gifts open. So I think what happened is my third eye could open because I was so focused and in the zone with my clients. It was like flow state that it let my crown chakra and my ajna open and the universe like drop in some downloads. So as I was reading human design charts, I was getting these like interesting messages about people and sharing them, and they were landing really well. And at that same time, the clairvoyant teacher who I had had my first reading with when I was living about to leave Panama, she was launching a clairvoyant certification. And she was like, I'm going to teach people to do what I do. And I was immediately like, that would be incredible. And I had an interview for the program. And I remember the teacher, her name is Degani, like I said, I'll link her here, wrote to me after and said, I actually will give you a scholarship. Like I just feel like you really need to be in this program. You can do this scholarship and come for free. Like you just need to be there. So I was like, okay, that feels like a huge universal green flag. So reading the human design, getting this clairvoyant certification, still working my part-time job as the assistant at the time. And another thing about my clairvoyant program is it was water for my soul, just like the human design. I would devour the homework. It was the highlight of my week, was really reading human designs and learning about being clairvoyant. And the program was incredibly comprehensive. We did past lives, Akashic records, like we did everything. I've since trained in the soul reading method through Nikki Novo, and that is a huge part of my intuitive journey. But this is my first time ever like really learning any of these modalities and past lives and chakras. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in love, you guys. I'm obsessed. So I did my clairvoyant certification. My clairvoyant teacher, Degani, offered me a job that didn't end up panning out because her company didn't end up taking on extra clairvoyants, like or more practitioners, but she really came to me and was like, I think you're really gifted at this, and I actually want to hire you when we finish class. And that was like such a huge, huge compliment. It's like the same thing as feeling like Jenna trusted me, someone that I admired and respected so much, said to me, like, I love the way you read human design charts, and I want to give you the gift of recommending you to my people. It was like the confirmation that I really needed to not let doubt get in the way and follow these, this completely random like desire from my soul to do this work. So I'm so grateful to those teachers that they believed in me, because through their belief in me, I was able to really believe in myself. And so I am strengthening my clairvoyant gifts, reading human design. And then by the spring, human design was really popping off. I read like so many charts this one month. I was like, whoa, amazing. I probably don't need this part-time job. And then I was able to leave my job as an assistant. And, I by no means was like making it rain, you guys, but I transparently, like my professional career, short of like my brief stint working in tech, and even then I had like an introductory level job in tech. So I had never gotten accustomed to a lifestyle that allowed me to have like a ton of like just like extra money, frankly. When I was in Colombia, I was like, shoot, like if we could go out once a month for dinner, like that, we're making it rain. Other than that, like it's patacones in the street. Like, of course, I come from, such a healthy upper middle class family. Like I never had to worry about like feeling financially safe, but I never really had the luxury of getting comfortable with a really high income. So it was a lot easier for me to feel like it was worth the risk to let go of my job as a personal assistant and keep doing human design and move to Hawaii. So I moved to Hawaii in the island of Kauai. I will probably get lazy and start just saying Kauai, in the summer of 2021, July 9th of 2021. And at that point, I had been at home in California for a year, which you guys, I had planned to stay in California for like 4 months. So it was an incredibly humbling experience to feel like I had to spend an entire year kind of building myself up again, but I did, and that's okay. And so I had planned to either move to Maui or Miami, or I was between Maui, Kauai, or Miami, which everyone's like, those places are so different, but I'm like, they have the ocean and that's all I need. So warm ocean, no offense to California, the ocean's just really cold all year round. So then I remember like I wrote to one ad on Craigslist, you guys. For some reason, I was meditating one night and my intuition was like, go on Craigslist to see if you can find something on on Kauai. And I found a one room available on Kauai exactly in my budget, sent an email, and immediately got a text message from the person. It was a woman named Ava, and she wrote me and said, hey, I actually know all about human design. I love human design. what is your design? Can you send me your chart? And I was like, sure. Send her my human design. You guys, random. I mean, Kauai is full of a bunch of like spiritual weirdos, so really not that random. But at the time, I was like exceptionally random. Sent her my chart, and she was like, "Great, this is perfect. I like move in next month." So it's like a place kind of fell on my lap, which if you, I mean, anyone listening to this probably doesn't know anything about the Hawaiian Islands, but especially Kauai, because it's the smallest island, housing just purely based off of supply and demand is not as abundant and available. And when people find out that I found a place living on the mainland, you know what Hawaiians people live in Hawaii call the US, living in the mainland, they're like shocked. They're like, no one finds a place on Kauai from the mainland. And I'm like, well, I knew none of that. And somehow I did. So I landed, I moved to the North Shore of Kauai. For anyone familiar, I lived in a town called Kilauea. And it was honestly kind of a shit show. My first 6 months, my housing was weird, but that's okay. We call it like the Kauai initiation. I lived in a house with this woman, Ava, and her dog who was missing a leg. His name was Cooper, and tragic, but he had gotten his leg ripped off by a wild boar when he was a puppy. Very sad, but no one could touch Cooper. Like you could not pet him. He was not a very like kind dog. Only the owner could pet him, which is weird because I love dogs and I'm like, okay, I live with this dog that I can't touch. One fateful day, you guys, Cooper jumped on my bed, cuddled with me, but I didn't touch him. I remember I was laying on my bed reading, jumps, nuzzles himself into my side, rolls around with me, jumps off my bed, never did it again. I was like, did that happen? Like, I don't know. So I'm living in this weird house for 6 months in Kauai and I'm reading human designs and I'm not, money was tight. I was like, okay, I'm doing this human design thing. And at that time, all of my clientele was really coming through my affiliation with Jenna because I would get readings directly through her website. And I didn't know how to grow a business. So I had kind of grown like a small following of like maybe like 2,000 people at that point, which isn't a lot, but from nothing to 2,000, I was like, okay, there's like some traction there. And then had started to do a little bit of coaching, but was like a bit confused as to what that would look like and felt incredibly like insecure as a business owner. I had no idea how to run a business. And honestly, I'm still learning, you guys, like entrepreneurship is such a different animal. And I didn't understand that what I had been doing was not being an entrepreneur. I was a spiritual practitioner. I was reading human design charts. I had zero of the skills that you need to grow a business. It's like a completely different skill set. And I didn't know any of that. So money was a bit tight. And then I needed to move out of my the crazy house after 6 months. And I met a really good friend on Kauai at the time, and we were looking at housing together. And we saw this sick house, you guys, that was beautiful. We went to go tour it, but it was going to double my rent. And I was like, okay, here's the thing. I don't have the financial capacity to double my rent right now, but I really want to live in this house. So I remember I went home and I prayed, and by some miracle, well, this is how the universe works, is in the language of miracles. And essentially what happened was I wanted to move in this house. I did a couple of human design readings, and every single one of them asked me to teach them how to read the human design. I would finish the session and I would say like, okay, great. Thank you so much for your time. My typical spiel. And they would say, hey, I love the way you read charts. Do you teach people to read human design? And this was tricky for me because, I learned through Jenna, and Jenna has a training online that's, super comprehensive and amazing, and, a low price point because it's a passive offering. And I knew if I was going to teach live, it was going to be more expensive because I was showing up. But I was like, you know what? This is clearly a sign. And at the same time, I kid you not, I got an email from a woman who lives in San Jose, Costa Rica, actually. Maybe at the time she was living in Panama, but she's Costa Rican and was going to move back. And she was like, hey, I saw on your website that you speak Spanish. Would you teach me to read human design in Spanish? And I was like, okay, there's something brewing here. So I created a training. I just like kind of wrote out an outline. And I remember going on a walk and saying to the universe, I just want my work to be an answer to people's prayers. And I still feel that way. What's hard about it's not hard, but when you're doing spiritual work and that's the way that you make your money and you provide for yourself, you have to have really clear lines that you are not just doing something because you need to make money. It will, in my opinion, it will fuck with the energy because you need to also really believe in it and really enjoy it, and you need to really love it. Otherwise, you get in that energy of like, which is going to come full circle when I talk about what happened over the past couple of years as I was learning to transition my business. If you're too focused on making money, you lose the heart. You can absolutely make money with your heart, but you cannot put the money before the heart because then you're going to end up in a body of work that you don't want to be in. And I believe that you will not have the energy for it unless you have a really intense kind of like hustler side. You can like make it happen, even if you don't like it, which if you do, I mean, congrats. I wish I had that because it would make life a lot easier, but I do not. And I don't think that you can be a successful spiritual entrepreneur selling products that you are not 100% in love with. So I said to God, I was like, please, I just want my work to be an answer to people's prayers. And I sent the outline off to the students who were interested in doing a training with me. And I got an email back from one of my angel clients who I love with my whole heart. And she said to me, Sean, thank God you're doing this. This is an answer to my prayers. And I was like, okay, dialed in, we're doing this. So this training changed the game for me in business. It turns out I would only launch it once, which was disappointing to my ego. But it changed the game for me because I built a ton of confidence to teach human design in Spanish, which I was like, whoa, we need to have a conversation. So I met with this woman over Zoom and I was like, I'm obviously not Latina. Like, are you sure you really want to learn from me? And, we had the whole conversation in Spanish. And she was like, no, I understand everything that you're saying. I really want you to teach me. And so I was like, you know what? I trust the universe. Let's just do this thing. So I was running these trainings in tandem and doing human design readings. I joined a business mastermind, was selling like higher ticket coaching. And I was like, fuck yeah, this is in the bag. Like, I know how to be an entrepreneur. And so was doing all of these things and then essentially went to launch my human design training again, and it completely flopped. It flopped, you guys, because I had no idea how to run a business and actually sell. And it's so different when you are selling a product that, because I kind of was selling direct to consumer in a sense of like, it would be like if you wrote to me and were like, Sean, will you make me this specific thing? I'm waiting in line to buy it. That's different than me coming to you and saying, you need this, here's why. You can do business both ways. Like if you are a practitioner who constantly has people coming to you, asking for what they need, if you've established that level of authority, ride that wave forever till the end of your career. But at that point, I didn't have enough of an established authority in the space that I could really expect that I had hundreds of people waiting for me to teach them to read human design. I had that very unique experience where those people came to me, and I believe it was God helping me move into this sick house. Thanks so much, God. Loved that house. So then I moved to a different house. I moved pretty much every 4 months in my time on Kauai because that was just my my fate. And, I was paying like a little bit less, but I had my coaching clients that were doing really well. So I wasn't that worried when the training launch didn't work out. But at the same time, this weird thing happened where I no longer loved human design like I did anymore. And I didn't know how to stop it. It was kind of like when you wake up one day and you are, I mean, I've never had this happen, but like people describe that you realize like you're not in love with somebody anymore. Like if you need to end a relationship, it felt that way with my beloved human design. And I was like, what is going on? This is my bread and butter. I don't know what I'm going to do. And it got to the point where I couldn't like, quote unquote, I'm putting like force myself to write about human design on Instagram. Like my capacity, it's like the lights went off in regard to human design in my inner world. I still really find the system to be tremendously useful. And if you work with me now, you know that, human design, she's involved. Like I love the system, but I had no passion left for sharing it in the way that I was. So I was like, okay, what are we going to do? And then at the same time, I found out that I knew I was going to receive an inheritance because As I mentioned in the first episode, my dad passed away. So in the will, my grandfather, my dad's dad, who I called Nanu, he was a great investor, didn't tell anybody until he died, and then had created this big portfolio, essentially investing in the stock market. And my dad would have inherited that money because he has two sisters. So when my Nani passed away, my dad's mom, Nani, passed when I moved to Kauai. So if he had not passed, all that money would have gone to him and then, his sisters. But because he had passed, my sisters and I represented him in the will. So I knew when I moved to Kauai that at some point I was going to get an inheritance, but there's like so much involved legally that it takes like years to work all that stuff out. So I didn't have access to it at that time. Hence why I was like, mommy's got to figure out a plan if I'm gonna make this life on Kauai work. So I had no idea like when that was gonna come through. And then I mean, the biggest blessing was that my human design, and I'm gonna share numbers with you guys because why not? In 2022, when I launched my trainings, I went from making like $10,000, $11,000 a month, which was huge for me. You guys, my first month reading human design charts, I think I made $600, and that was amazing to even clear 10,000 to make $11,000 in 1 month doing what I loved. I was blown away. I did not have the systems in place to hold that revenue, which I learned over time in growing a business. But regardless, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And then December of 2022, I literally made $0 in my business and it was terrifying. I remember just like freaking out because like I had enough money saved up because I had high revenue months and I had stored up my eggs for the winter. But I think I've mostly felt so defeated because I was like, I really want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know how to do this. I was like, I can't. It's like, if you're an entrepreneur, it's so unsettling for your nervous system to feel that extremity of fluctuation in your income. If you're someone who runs your business off of like high ticket launches and you know that you are storing your eggs for the winter, it's no big thing. My launches weren't that high ticket. So I was like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I'm terrified. And then I ended up finding out that I was going to receive my inheritance. And I was like, oh my God, I can breathe. Thank goodness. And I feel a bit torn sometimes, like, I guess admitting to people that I had this financial help from my family because I know how lucky that is and not everybody has that. But I also want to be really honest that being an entrepreneur is hard and everything is hard, but you literally are the person in charge of creating your everything, right? You're not relying on, other people's companies, you're relying on your own. And it often takes a company time to grow to the extent that it can give you the salary that you need to live your life. If you're an entrepreneur, like your process to get there. If you're a budding entrepreneur, I'm sure I'll talk about this in later episodes. I'm not going to go that far into it, but like you really need to understand that if you are building a company, that company needs to be a separate entity of you and that company pays you. You might provide the services for that company, right? Like my company, Sean Nicole, it's a limited liability corporation, LLC. Obviously, I am the only employee, I am the only employee. You guys, I don't have anyone I have hired full time. I work for my own company, but my company pays me. And that's really important because you just need to see your company as this entity that provides for you. My company was not there. I saw my income plummet and I was really scared. But I got this money from my family, and I actually feel like an older version of me would have never given myself the luxury of actually like accepting that abundance. I think an older version of me that had like a super kind of like chip on my shoulder would have decided that I needed to like put all that money away and just like keep hustling. But I think I was so tired and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I traveled for a little bit. This was also a time when I was going through like another housing crisis on Hawaii and like a break. It was just like a lot of my emotional life felt incredibly tumultuous. And so I decided to give myself a break. I still was reading human design through Jenna, but at that point I had really slowed down. And then I traveled for a bit, January, February, went to Mexico. And I say that because like Mexico is my another one of my like soul's homes. I love Mexico. And every time I go to Mexico, I kid you not, every time I get what they call Montezuma's revenge. I get really sick. But on the other side of that sickness, I find like a new version of myself. It's very odd. I'm going to finish up the episode, but this happened again to me this past fall when I was in Tulum. But so I went to Mexico, got really sick, started working with my coach, Nikki Novo, who's Nikki's been such a big part of my journey. Nikki, I love you forever and always. And then I essentially got back to Kauai and was like, okay, I need to start a business that actually stands on its 2 feet. And that business cannot be human design. That was clear. I was like, I don't have energy for it anymore. I think if I'm going to be honest, I didn't like where the industry was going. I think at that time, I don't really follow much human design content anymore because I frankly don't care to, you guys. Like I love it and I, know a lot about it, but it's not like I'm following accounts. And I feel like a lot of the accounts where I tell people, like, in my opinion, they were perpetuating separation consciousness and like creating a lot of divisiveness about like different types. And I also don't like content that's like, if you're a projector, da da da. Like to me, the chart in and of itself is such a like each chart is such a unique kind of universal imprint that like I don't even like giving one size fits all advice about a projector because I could read a 6-2 projector with a defined root versus a 5-1 projector with, the self-projected authority. And like I just was like, I don't resonate with this delivery and the way that this is being presented to the masses. And this no longer sits right with me anymore. So I started working with my coach, Nikki, and I got a job at a clothing store in Kauai. I was like, I just want a job in person. I want to go to one job like a couple times a week and just feel more like stability. I think I felt like so much, like such a lack of stability after moving on Kauai and seeing my business income plummet. And it just was too much for me to handle. So I got a job in person, moved into an actual long-term spot in Kauai, which was another shit show because that just, it's just crazy times. But I moved into what I affectionately called my gnome home and really decided that I was going to niche. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to niche. I created what's called the soul alignment session because I essentially really wanted to work more with the soul. I wanted to use my intuitive gifts. And I started with a career session, didn't like it, and then went to the soul alignment session, which you guys, the soul alignment session, of course, I created it, is a beautiful piece of art, but I wasn't that in love with it. And I didn't realize that. So I just was kind of doing the soul stuff, learning how to, like, this is when I did my first, like, started an email list, did my first training, like, just doing like business 101, you guys, that I did not know. Blessings again to the soul that is Nikki Novo, because I was like, I just didn't know any of this stuff. So I started to kind of build this out, and then still wasn't making money. And I was like, okay, I need to make money. I had that job at the clothing store. I left and decided to travel. So I used some of my inheritance to do this like amazing trip to Europe, came back from Europe, and then was like, okay, my business isn't taking off yet. It needs more time. And then I got a job at a restaurant for literally like 2 months on Kauai, you guys, because I got fired from the restaurant because they were like, you talk to the customers too much. You guys, I worked at this restaurant for 2 months and I have Yelp reviews that people loved me, but I just did not know how to like turn them and burn them. I was like, I'm a healer. So of course, I'm like trying to deliver someone's tacos and they're like, it's been really hard since the divorce. And I'm like, I totally get it. And my boss was like, we need you like, out waiting tables. And I was like, true, that's my job. So basically I was in this financially tough position, got the job at the restaurant, and then got the opportunity to be on Nikki's podcast. And at that point, I had basically decided it was most important for me to make money. I needed to provide for myself. So I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to make money, if I'm going to be honest. And that meant niching. So what I did, you guys, and I recommend this for anybody in business, and what I'm doing now with my new session, it's kind of an experiment. We'll see how it goes. But you need to test your audience to find out what you can offer them that they really want to purchase. So what I did was tested a couple of different workshops and trainings, and most people wanted me to talk about career and work. And I love career and work because I spent so long trying to find my dream work. Y'all, I was like nonprofits and tech and teaching and, trying to get my PhD. And like, I knew the struggle and I liked talking about work. So that's where the energy was. And then I was on Nikki's podcast and I had, two sessions on my calendar. I had soul alignment and then I called career alignment. Literally 98% of people who booked a reading from that podcast booked a career alignment session. I was like, I think one client booked a soul alignment session. I kept working with her. She's incredible, but she literally was the only person. So I was like, okay, the sign is here. So I decided I was going to niche into career stuff, had that opportunity, which was a game changer to be on Nikki's podcast. And then I decided I needed to move to Costa Rica, taught a group program as well. Like at that same time, I had, sorry guys, hit my mic. I had some clients who wanted to do a group program with me. So I basically was like, I was making more money and I was like, you know what? I can't stay on Kauai anymore. We're not, I'm sure I'll do a podcast about like how to figure out where to live. It was not my place anymore. So I moved to Costa Rica where, it was dicey, you guys, financially, but I was like, whatever, like, let's do this thing. So I moved to Costa Rica and then got the opportunity to teach in Coach Nikki's program. Nikki Novo, you truly are a hero for me. And basically, the moment I got to Costa Rica, was able to create more consistent revenue with my coaching clients, doing my sessions, but actually really coaching was a huge thing for me. And I love coaching, you guys. It makes my heart really happy. So basically created consistent income and then wanted to go on a trip to Europe because I was in Costa Rica and the rainy season hit. So the rainy season was like really gnarly and I was coming back or I was just working in my apartment and then it would start raining really early in the afternoon and I couldn't get outside. Like you can hang out outside in the rain, but like Costa Rica is like jungle rain. Like it's like pounding your like you don't want to be chilling outside when it's raining here. So I started to feel really sad and I was like, okay, I'm going to travel again. And I had I had coaching clients. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to travel. And also, the cost of living here is so high that it's not like I was spending more money if I was traveling. I ran the numbers and I was like, it's really virtually the same. I'm going to go. And then on my trip, everything changed, you guys. This trip, which my mind didn't want to go on, which sounds silly because it's like you have the opportunity to go to Europe. Like, why would you not want to do that? But I think I have this part of me that feels like I'm irresponsible, if I'm going to be honest, because I'm a bit of a gypsy. And I don't think that that means that I'm irresponsible in my core. Like, I know the true definition of responsibility is, of course, like keeping your house in order as far as like, paying your bills and taking care of your life. But I think I have this like weight sometimes that responsibility is like following this like traditional path. And it's just not what my soul wants. And so I was a bit frustrated because I was like, I want to ground somewhere. And suddenly I'm leaving again. And I had only been in Costa Rica for a couple of months. And so I had to kind of listen to my soul. And my soul was saying, like, listen, you are unhappy in Costa Rica when it rains this much. The best thing you can do for yourself and for your business is be happy because, if I'm the one showing up for my business every day, I want to be in beautiful, brilliant energy. So I planned a trip my dream was to go to Greece and hop the Greek islands. So that's exactly what I did. I I visited four Greek, how many? I did Mykonos, Paros, Naxos, Santorini, and Milos. So I did 5 Greek islands. And this trip was beyond for me. I think it was also the fact that I was, doing this work that I really enjoyed. Like I love my coaching clients. I was, working and bopping around and I just was really, I can't even describe the level of joy because it's hard to articulate when it's just hard. It's like there's so many factors involved with that amount of joy. I think it was the fact that I was so fulfilled by what I was doing. Like, I know I'm not the person who can feel like I have this great job that pays my bills and lets me travel, but I don't like doing it. I'm not that person, right? Hence why I decided to become an entrepreneur. And I love Greece. Like the Mediterranean Ocean is, game over. Like you see it in your heart. It's so beautiful. And I felt exceptionally free, just like swimming and really empowered being by myself. And I just felt really happy. And then I did a road trip with one of my best friends in the world who will also come on the pod at some point, Alice. We road tripped from Naples, Italy to Sicily, which was, I mean, really insane, you guys. Like Italy is like incredible. And Sicily has the most hardcore Italians you've ever met in your life. And it's like, I mean, the best, one of the best places on earth. So had the time of my life doing that road trip, went to Mexico. And Mexico is when things really started to shift because I was realizing that like deep in my heart, I loved helping people find their soul work, but I knew that I was missing something and I couldn't put my finger on what I was missing. But I got to Mexico and I just was like, something is off. And I just don't know what it is. And was in Mexico City and then wanted to go to Tulum for like a month because I just at that point I don't think I had slept in one place for more than 6 nights. I had been on one Greek island, Naxos. I stayed for more like 6 nights. But besides that, I had been on the go for at that, like, 6 weeks. And I needed to ground. So I was like, I'm going to ground in Tulum because there's the ocean and there's a ton of like Airbnb options there. So prices aren't, absurdly expensive. So I was like, okay, great. We'll go to Tulum. And at first it was not great. You guys, I got to Tulum like the second day of like a hurricane was passing, rain. Um, Tulum it's just very different from anywhere I had been. As much as I had spent time in Latin America, I think the extremity of inequality, which that most definitely exists in where I was living in Colombia and Cartagena, but Tulum is next level because it has like the New York, like wellness, like very curated to a certain type of, I would say, more like posh bougie traveler. And then the Pueblo has like, I mean, the worst roads you've ever seen in your life. And it just was like it kind of sorry, I slapped my mic again. It hurt my heart a little bit. Like I was like, I just don't like seeing this. And it was hard times, but I needed to go on a journey in Tulum. I did not know that, but I had two experiences that changed me in Tulum. The first was I did what's called the Temazcal, which is this like big sauna, like kind of like an outdoor, well, it's like I'm gonna have a hard time describing this, you guys. It essentially looks like a teepee, but it's made of cement, and you go inside of it, and it has a fire pit in the middle. And you work with, it doesn't have to be a shaman, but it's like a spiritual guide who leads the ceremony, and they light the fire pit so it becomes like and it's super hot inside of the temazcal, and they close the door so you're in the dark. And it's a big like mental game because it's like a sauna, like you're super hot and you can't see anything and you're just like freaking out and you just have to tell your mind like it's going to be okay, you're going to be okay. And I did the temazcal on the day of the like Dia de los Muertos. It was for the Day of the Dead in Mexico. And I thought I had processed a lot of grief around my dad. It's been, at that point, it'd been almost 10 years. I'm like, we got this. And we were all talking about lost loved ones in the temazcal, and it's kind of freeing because it's dark and no one can see you. And so all you do is say like, I want to say something, and you just kind of like you let it out. And you guys, I cried so much in that temazcal, and I realized that I had so much anger actually towards my dad's soul for leaving. Like I was like pissed. I was like, you left me, you left mom. And I just was like letting it all out. And something shifted. It's like I got out of the temazcal and I wasn't mad anymore. And I think I really needed to let that anger go. And then 2 days later, I ate avocado toast for dinner because that is what my soul was really desiring from a restaurant with an egg on it. That within 2 hours gave me the worst food poisoning of my life. We're not going to get into the details because that's disgusting, but I was just destroyed. This was like the day of the election. I like couldn't move. It was horrible. By a couple of days, I could kind of move, eat toast, able to see my clients. And then come that Saturday, I still was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I feel awful. Wrote to a doctor, got an antibiotic, and I'm not kidding you guys, within 5 hours, it was like I could see the light. Like, I took the second dose of antibiotic and I ate my first like solid food, like real food besides like toast. And I cried. I was like, oh my God, like I feel good again. life is good. I feel good. And it sounds like I feel silly talking about it because it's like, okay, you got food poisoning for a week, Sean. Like, it's not a big deal. But there's something about that experience that was a huge deal. It's like I purged an old like persona. Like I came out of that other side of that and was like, why am I wasting time on things in my life that do not bring me joy? I was like, I don't know why I would ever do that. And like, I did not realize it was, I think I needed to get so sick to kind of create this sense of awareness around how much I had actually been letting fear drive my life. Fear of not being able to make money doing what I loved. So I'm gonna force myself to do something that I think can make money, even if I don't really love it, because I just need to make money. I just need to make this business work. And I understand like we are people, and part of being people is like, we need some way to provide for ourselves. I have like no judgment towards how anyone provides for themselves, right? Like if you're getting, of course, other people can provide for us. I don't care at all. And, I just had to accept that like I am a single woman. Like I do, I do provide for myself right now. And that just had messed with me to the point where I had forgotten that like I already have chosen to take the biggest risk of being an entrepreneur. I am not going to waste my time doing work that I am not in love with. And if it turns out that I can't make money doing what I deeply love, I will go get a job. But I choose making money doing what I deeply love than making my own money doing what I kind of like. It doesn't work for me as an entrepreneur. It backfired, and I need to wait until something feels like it is truly like the biggest fuck yes in the depths of my soul. I need that, and I want it to be what I'm passionate about. It's funny because I kind of forgot about passion, which like is important, especially if you are choosing to go into work for yourself. You do it because you could just simply be passionate about having a lifestyle full of freedom, but that's not enough for me. It's more important for me. I'd rather do work I'm passionate about and work for somebody else than do work that I'm not passionate about and work for myself. Like I am a person driven by passion and joy and love. And I think that through that sickness, I was able to see all the ways that fear programming was keeping me in a box, trapped, kind of like half-assing my life, actually, if I'm going to be real, which is hard to say because I remember like talking to one of my best friends about this, and she's like, I never in a million years would have guessed that you didn't already believe all the things you're telling me you now believe. And from the outside, I'm sure it didn't look like I was half-assing my life, but in my heart, in my soul, I was. And on the other side of this sickness, I was like, no more. I will not do that to myself ever again. Nothing is more important than the truth of my heart. And that mean that I have to find ways of making money in the short term that aren't as satisfying so I can get to my end game? Yeah, and I already tried that. I had gotten a job at the clothing store at a restaurant, and I was like, I don't care, but I choose passion, and I will find a way to make an iteration of my business that I love with my whole heart work, no matter what. Because I really believe that when we love what we do, it's funny, I was talking to my dad the other night, and I was like, sometimes I'm like, maybe it's time to throw in the towel, like if I'm going to switch this up again with this new session. And he said, if you give up on your work, you give up on yourself. Would you ever give up on yourself? And I was like, hell no, I will never give up on myself. So in that case, let's keep going. And that basically was like what really shifted in me on this trip. And I got back to Costa Rica and, settled into this house for a couple of months, which for me is like a lifetime. People are like, wow, a 5-month lease. And I'm like, listen, for me, that's an eternity. So, great. And something came through me. So what happened was I got back to Costa Rica in December. I really wanted to do this soul aligned year ahead reading because I was feeling really excited about the new year. And I was like, oh, I just really want to help souls figure out like where they can go in 2025 to really maximize the year. And my soul told me, do not plan any structure. So previously I was doing soul alignment, career alignment. Those sessions are very structured. Not really going to get into the details because if you're not a practitioner, like you don't care, but I go into meditation with an agenda and I complete my steps and I deliver the reading. And, if you had the reading, like it's a great reading. I love it. It's just very I'm not going to say that I like it. It's just structured. So my soul was like, okay, freestyle, meditate, see what happens. And something changed. I started to do this soul aligned to your head reading, and I was like, wow, I forgot how much I love the soul and I love meditation and I love communing with the essence of the soul. Because what was happening in these readings is I was picking up on people's true essences, and their essences were explaining where their soul wanted to go and how their soul wanted to express and what was really this next level of life for them. And it made me remember how much I like really love this work. So I started to do this soul aligned to your head reading, realized how much I loved it, and then I felt my soul telling me that I needed to do this thing called the essence session. And I was like, okay. And as I've explained, like I am analytical. So there's still the part of me that's like a bit confused by my soul's desire to do this like woo woo work, because I'm like, the essence session, like, what is that? How am I going to explain that to people? How do I make this practical? Because I know in my heart the most important thing is that we're connected to the truth of our souls. But, to be a good communicator and a good business owner, I need to be able to sell that to somebody. They need to know why living by the truth of their soul is the medicine that they need. And I was like, can I bridge that? To be honest, you guys, I don't know how I'm going to bridge that. But I know that I want more than anything to do this session and to do this work in the world. And so I'm going to figure it out. And so my soul started to tell me, you need to do this thing called the essence session. I went on a trip to the Caribbean for the new year. That was really life changing, had healing time with my family, warmed my heart and soul, got back last month, and was like, all right, this essence session, what does this look like? Was still doing the soul aligned to your head reading, practice the essence session on people. And you guys, this session is my heart's like out in the world, which is kind of intense. And I accept that that's just intense. Actually my sister always like makes fun of me when I'm like, Chancey's my dog. I'm like, my dog Chance is my heart outside of my body. Like he lives in California. Like I rarely see him, but he's my heart outside of my body, you guys. I'm obsessed with him. I feel that way about this session. The essence session is everything to me right now. It is the truest manifestation of my gifts in the world, and that is where my focus is going to go. So the reason why I'm calling it the essence session is because through my spiritual work and my spiritual investigations, the essence of the soul is kind of like the energetic signature of the soul. So when you are tapped into your soul's truth, that is expressed through your essential nature, your way of being, like your true self. And you need your essence to be your true self. And I believe that when we infuse everything in our life with our essence and we live by what is essential. I also, in the group program I taught in the spring, I was like, essence, essential. Oh my God, what is essential is derived from the essence. This is what we need to be in touch with to live these really like truthful lives. And truthful just means that that is what is the most energetically in resonance with us, is what is true. And I think that when we can have what's true, we are always going to sit down and lay in bed with ourselves and feel at peace and at home. And there's nothing more important than that. I was like, I will feel more at home with myself if I lay down to sleep at night and I launch this essence session, however the hell I'm going to sell it, than if I keep doing this career work that I know isn't true for me. And I'm making, I don't care, you guys, $100,000 a month, but I lay down at night and I know that that's not my calling. I choose the essence session, whatever it's going to become. And I believe, you guys, truth matters more than anything. And when we deviate from the truth, we know. When we're pursuing goals that aren't true for us, when we're dating people that aren't true for us, when we're filling our lives with relationships that aren't true for us, our soul knows, our body knows, and we don't feel like we can bring our true selves online, and we don't feel like we can live by our essence because we're in a mismatched reality. And that is what causes so much suffering. Like the suffering that's like, damn, like what am I doing here? What am I doing on this earth? Like, what's going on? That is the manifestation of living out of alignment with our truth. So the essence session. What is she? So it's going to be a 45-minute experience, is what my soul wants to call it. It's me in meditation. And what I'm doing is I'm meeting with your soul, meeting with your soul's essence, and I'm giving you an energetic read as to where you're at and where your soul wants to go and how you can get there and what your life is going to look like on the other side. I can't give you like really detailed predictions, but what I can do once I read into your essence is tell you, once you start to embody this essence and bring this essence online, here's how your work wants to shift, your relationships wants to shift, your relationships want to shift, and any other part of your life. Pending what is happening with you, I will also give recommendations around how you can support the update, like the upgrade to living by your essence with your body. I learned this a lot because I got so sick and I felt my relationship with my body really change to being so much more about loving her and taking care of her and not needing her to look a certain way. And that meant doing different types of exercise, even eating different types of foods. I'm even going to talk about style if that comes up, because it won't come up for everybody. But for me, like, style is such a huge way that our soul really wants to express. So let's say your soul really wants to be embodied in a more like boss babe kind of way. Like maybe your soul wants you rocking a blazer and like a bralette underneath. And I think oftentimes we don't dress the way we really want to because we think that we can, or who are we to do that? Or we've been wearing, this outfit since we were whatever age, and the soul will show me style. And so I really want to talk about that too, if that comes up. So what it is a 45-minute experience where I'm telling you where your soul wants to go, how your essence really wants to express, how you can get there, and what your life will energetically feel like on the other side. And I love it. It is truly feels like I've been preparing for this for years. I thought that about the soul alignment session and the career alignment session, and it turned out my soul had to go one step further. And I just really hope that it can help lots of people. Truly, that has always been the depth of my heart and soul, has always been to just help people find their path in life, find their truth, follow their hearts and their souls, because I know how important that is. So that is where we're going to be going. The Essence session will be on my calendar this month. It's going to be the only session that I will offer. And I hope that if you're called to book it, you book it and you love it. And just know that I am still going to talk about career when it makes sense, and it will, because another thing too, you guys, is I thought a lot about my young self. And I was like, you know what, even 25-year-old me stuck in my job and stuck. I wasn't stuck. I literally worked it for 9 months, you guys, and then I bailed. In my job in tech, I wouldn't have even been ready for an intuitive to come to me and tell me I needed to do spiritual work. I would have been like, what? Not ready. What I really needed was someone to tell me what the truth of my soul was and what my essence was calling me to do, even if that meant that I would have just known, I would have had more awareness around who I really was. That would have been more important than someone telling me to go to graduate school, which intuitives did. And I was like, I can't do that. The most profound information would have been what my soul was really yearning for and what my essence was and how it wanted to express. Like, truly, that would have been the best medicine for me at the time. Not someone telling me exactly what type of job I need. I actually just don't think that anyone can do that. I think you need to get in touch with your essence, and then you can find all these aligned things on the other side. But you have to see that you are the cart. Don't put the cart before the horse. You are the horse. Everything else in your life is the cart. Like, I feel like I was saying this so much in my year ahead readings, but it's true. It's like we have to focus on the horse and know that everything else in our lives, our jobs, our relationships, like, those are a result of us being in alignment with our truth and in our true nature. And then the universe can be like, fuck yeah, let's create all the things that are in resonance and in alignment with this true essence of this beautiful soul. This is exactly how we would hoped and dreamed that he or she would express in their human body. Let's roll out all of the right things for them to come into alignment with. And that is just really what I think is more profound and important, is learning how to energetically support yourself and your essence where it wants to go. And then everything else in your life can really become a match for that. So I hope that all makes sense. And if you have questions about the session, please feel free to email me. I think I'll probably put my email in the show notes. Why not? My Instagram too. So please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. But yeah, if you're called to the session, book it and let's chat. Let's see what your essence is up to. And I really appreciate you guys listening. It means so much to me. And thank you. Like, this podcast is a huge way. This show, how my essence really wanted to express. And I'm just grateful that I listened to that call. And yeah, grateful to you for being here. And I love you guys so much. And I will see you next week.